Yesterday, the city of Washington unveiled a newly renamed street outside of the embassy of Saudi Arabia. Take a look. So it will now be known as Jamal Khashoggi Way. This is obviously to commemorate the journalist and activist Jamal Khashoggi, who was butchered by the Saudi government in a consulate in Istanbul.
At the orders of
Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He was a critic of MBS. He was a columnist for the Washington Post. This comes just ahead of a Biden trip to Saudi Arabia, which is interesting but kind of coincidental timing. But it kind of shows kind of who's winning here. Like Jamal gets a street. MBS is going to, not only is he not facing accountability, he's getting a meeting with the president.
I mean, he's going to get a willing customer, basically. And it's an interesting question because the killing of Khashoggi became a talking point in the campaign, specifically for Joe Biden. And it's become the anti-Saudi rallying cry, I think, for a lot of Democrats. And in a way that, I mean, I've always felt extremely virtue signaling. And I think this totally bears it out. Just the theatrics with which a lot of Democrats in particular leveraged the Khashoggi talking point. This is a good example as to the fact that was politically expedient for them, but not necessarily entirely genuine, because here Joe Biden is going to Saudi Arabia after talking very tough about MBS on the campaign trail, and he's going to go look for oil.
And I think there was no doubt some virtue signaling, but I also think some of it was real in this sense. So there had been a push for years among Democrats to try to wind down U.S. involvement in the war in Yemen that wasn't getting over the top. And it was only after Khashoggi was killed that moved forward. The War Powers Resolution to end that moved forward. And I think one of the things that's real about this for people in Washington is they don't know the Yemenis people, the hundreds of thousands of people dying in Yemen as a result of this war. But a lot of them knew Khashoggi. Like I've mentioned this before. I had lunch with him like 3 weeks before he was chopped to pieces in this consulate. He was a charismatic figure. And so to see that happen to him, I think there was something in Washington, and Republicans had a similar reaction to say, oh no, like. The butchering is of Yemenis. Like he is kind of one of us in a way. Like he's Washington, Virginia resident, like a kind of somebody who's known in Washington. Like you don't do this to an American resident. You don't do this to somebody that we have met personally, and you have now crossed the line into barbarism. And I think there's a lot problematic with that thinking about human lives. But I also think it's real, like that people, have a reaction that is different when it's somebody that they know compared to strangers in a strange land.
Definitely. I also think the mounting evidence of Saudi involvement in 9/11 is cracking the foundation. The more that we learn about that, the more that I think the political establishment in Washington has a reason to start taking money from other people, because that's how this really works. When you see people being apologists in Washington for different groups, there's people in their ear making money from them, foreign actors, and there's people in their ear making money for them, or they themselves are making money from them, or their allies in ways that influence the discourse. And in fact, on that note, we should talk about new evidence in the case of Shireen Akleh, who's an American, a journalist, a Christian, and appears to have been murdered by the IDF.
Right, and so the Washington Post is the latest to have a forensic investigation into the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh in this outside of this Jenin refugee camp, and they have found what others have found since then. CNN before them. CNN was extremely consequential. I think that CNN found this, but it's just as, and also very important that the Washington Post is willing to run this type of examination. Basically, they find that the audio, visual, and eyewitness reports show that it was IDF. It was an IDF soldier who shot Shireen Akleh in the face while she was wearing a giant press badge as a Palestinian American journalist. It's the evidence now is beyond something that you can refute. The Washington Post editorial board, which to its credit has crusaded against Saudi Arabia for the killing of its columnists.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Let's put that up real quickly. I want to read from this. This is from the Washington Post editorial. They said the Post investigation is also noteworthy for what it did not uncover. So this is them dragging their own reporting. Proof that a soldier targeted Ms. Abu Akleh because she was a journalist, which Israel has always denied. Still less did the Post report show that she was, quote, assassinated in cold blood, as the Qatar-owned Al Jazeera declared within hours of her death. Israel, within a day of May 11th, walked back its initial denials and now acknowledges its troops' possible fault. And then they write, I don't have the exact quote there, but then they say all of this could have been avoided if there had not been killings done by Palestinians of Israelis. So they're saying that, well, okay, maybe the Israelis did kill Akleh, but actually it was the fault of other Palestinians who are not her, who did things that are condemnable and deplorable, that forced the hand of the Israelis. And also, can we pause on the Qatar-owned Al Jazeera? Does the Washington Post like to be called the Bezos-owned Washington Post?
No, I'm fine with both, though, to be honest with
fine,
you.
yes.
But yeah, they don't like it.
Fine.
Right. Yeah, no, it's double standard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and we covered this when it was still breaking news, as the details were coming in. And people know I'm conservative, I'm pro-Israel. I don't think those things necessarily have to go together, but they do for me. And I was very much in the camp that, we don't know what happened here. We should wait for evidence to come out. And in fact, we've now had a couple of weeks. The evidence has come out, and Israel has yet to mount a counter argument or a defense that is as convincing as the video and audio analyses that media outlets, CNN, Washington Post, Bellingcat did one, and you right. said, I think Ryan, you tweeted, like, if Bellingcat, if even the CIA, even they think they knew what happened here. And so there's really, the evidence is clearly stacked on one side of this conversation. And given who Akleh was, the lack of, I think, concern, not just on the right, but in American politics in general, is disappointing. It's not surprising, I don't think, given the interests at stake here. But I don't think that it's right to just sort of brush this to a secondary news story.
And what are the chances that we will get a Shireen Abu Akleh way in front of the Israeli embassy? Like, what are the chances?
Oh, that's not happening.
Right, but why not? Like, it's fascinating that won't happen. And further, the Post had 8 different offensive things in 4 sentences there.
The wording was really bad.
And one of them, they say, the critics of Israel have just not given them any credit for acknowledging X, Y, and Z. Israel lied every step of the way with their firm denials and put out misleading information to try to back up their denials. The only time that they have backed off of their claims were when video and other forensic information emerged that just flatly contradicted what they said. And so then they would back up a little bit and say, okay, we're backing off this, now we say that this. And then they would back off that, and they would back off that. And the Post wants them to get enormous amounts of credit for that, for having their lies exposed and admitting that the lies were exposed. And then now they want to find refuge in, well, we don't know the particular motive of the particular IDF sniper who put a bullet in her face. What kind of proof would exist? You'd have to have a recording of the internal monologue of the soldier while they're aiming at Akleh. Yeah. Or you'd have to have, I guess, what do they expect? That there's going to be some memo that says, what, you need to find journalists and kill them outside this. That's not going to exist. And if you set the standard of proof there, then you're always going to find them innocent.
The bullet patterns, the circumstances of the shooting make it look really deliberate. If you look at how many shots were fired, if you look at where they were concentrated, it obviously looks deliberate, which is hard to reconcile with the fact that they were clearly identified as press, and that the places where Palestinian forces may have been firing just don't comport with what we know about. Like it would have been very difficult to mistake where the Palestinians were firing as a threat to where the IDF was in that case. And all of these analyses bear it out with like literal measurements.
And 180 meters.
Right.
So you'd have to be looking through a scope at 180 meters and being able to see well enough that you can see her face, but you can't see press.
Right. Well, it's not. She had a helmet.
And back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
and you had to miss the
sense.
helmet in order to perform this execution. So yeah.
No, it doesn't make sense at all. I still think it would probably be helpful to have an independent, or at least turn the bullet over to the United States and have that analysis, which has not happened so far. But all that is to say, it doesn't justify anything, and it doesn't make this any less likely to have been deliberate on the part of this IDF soldier. Whether it reflects something broader is a different question. But we have enough evidence right now to say this American journalist, her fate was tragic, unfortunate, and unjust.
And my guess, I bet a soldier goes down for this.
I know. I would guess the exact same thing. They're going to throw
somebody under the bus here.
Yep, yeah. I would guess.
And they'll do 6 months.
Well, somebody might really deserve to be thrown under the bus as an individual, I think, clearly.
Right.
Right.
All right, well, we will have more Rising for you right after this.